Yeah. Hey, Alex. Hello. Good evening. I'd like to call this budget hearing to order. And tonight we will hear from the Fire Department and the Department of Public Works. We have our Budget Director here, Jose Sanchez, who will start things off, and my understanding is the Chief Operating Officer will arrive later. Sure. Thank you. Yeah, we can hear you. And a microphone made its way.
Good evening, Council President, members
Good evening.
of the Court of Common Council. My name is Ed Caceres, Fire Chief and Director of Emergency Management for the City of Hartford Fire Department. This is my fourth budget hearing, budget presentation, and it's my last as Chief of the Department. After 33 years, it's time to move on to other opportunities. I just want to let everybody know that they'll be missed, and that I want to thank them for allowing me to be the chief of this department, world-class organization. And I'll go on with my budget presentation. Our next slide is the organizational structure. As you see, I report to the mayor as the chief and emergency manager, executive assistant. I have an executive office. Currently have an assistant chief who also serves as a deputy director of emergency management. And the department has 6 divisions, from our emergency services, fire marshal's office, special services, our training, fire alarms, technology and communication, and our newly formed management and strategic services. Next slide. Some department statistics. We have 397 members when just retired. 38% of our department members are bona fide Hartford residents. The department responds to approximately 22,037 incidents. That's what we're projecting out. 15,000 of those are emergency medical service calls. I would like to say that the department provides some of the best pre-hospital care in the region. The only way you can improve on it is by putting a doctor on board, and I don't think we want to put a doctor on board, but our pre-hospital care to our residents and visitors is second to none. On average, we're averaging about 71 building fires in the city, which is down from a 2005 number of 266. So the department has made dramatic decreases in the amount of building fires. And our response time is, on average, 4 minutes 90% of the time. When I became chief, our response time was 4 minutes 58% of the time. So we went from an F to an A. Next slide. We look at some fiscal year comparisons. As you see, when I became chief in fiscal year 10-11, you'll see the trend, and of course this fiscal year we're looking at a decrease in our recommended budget of $31,227,000. Next slide. This is sort of a breakdown of where the money goes. You see 86% goes into emergency services, which is fire, emergency medical services, hazardous material response, technical rescue, and things of that nature. And the rest is spread around. The majority is in our emergency services. The rest of the dollars are the support functions for emergency services. Next slide. Over the past few fiscal years, you'll see that these are some contractual obligations, cost of living adjustments that we have absorbed in our budgets. fiscal year 10-11, it's been averaging about 3.25% per fiscal year. Next slide. Our overtime, you see when I became chief, overtime was at $3.5 million, fiscal year 10-11, and it's going down gradually. That's what we have recommended. This coming fiscal year, 13-14, we're recommending a $1 million overtime budget, down from $3.5 million a couple fiscal years ago. Next slide. Some of our strategic initiatives, we're looking to achieve some ethics compliance training, basically some professional responsibility, enhanced government, in 3 phases. So we're going to implement phase 1, and it's based on, some recent events that kind of brought some negative media attention to the department, and so we're providing some training, ensuring that our employees understand that the high standards that they need to achieve, that they're held to and to achieve, and that they have a responsibilities. Our members do very well when they're trained. They perform very well when they're trained. And we have a responsibility as leaders to train them in what's expected of them. And once that's done, we prove that we meet the goal that we set out. Also, we're looking to look at our emergency management plan and conduct a gap analysis, and that'll enhance our emergency management strategies, plans, and before we start to use resources that are limited in enhancing our plan, we'd like to make sure that the dollars that we're expending are going toward going in the right areas, that they meet national standards, and then they can meet that we can have an all hazards plan that is second to none. And along with that, we will be conducting drills as it relates to our emergency management plan. And we're also looking for another strategic initiative is the selection of an entry-level and promotional testing vendor. We'd like to have a vendor on board that will be able to meet the unique needs of the city of Hartford and ensure that our youth have a level playing ground in applying for positions here and being successful in gaining employment with the City of Hartford Fire Department, and also to provide a level playing field in the promotional testing arena. Next slide. A couple of issues on our capital improvement plan that we have submitted. The renovation of fire station located at 150 Sisson Avenue, Engine Company 11. This firehouse is tired. It needs help. As I walk into the new public safety complex, and I come in and work in a state-of-the-art environment, I know that I have members of the department who are housed and have to work in conditions that are close to being unsafe and unhealthy for them. It's very close. So I would hope that the council looks at the capital improvement plan and looks favorably on the renovation of Engine Company 11 and Ladder 5 located at 150 Sisson Avenue. Our training academy, I think it was put up in 1963. It needs some renovation. We'd like to set aside some dollars to look at the best way to get the most life based on the activities that are taken upon in there. And what we'd like to do is have a joint venture with Hartford Police so that they would have another place where they can conduct some of their drills or exercise their tactics that they need to ensure that their folks are properly trained. So we would share that, so you would get the bang for the buck. Police and fire would share in those resources that are expended to enhance our training academy. Sisson Avenue Firehouse needs help, and I hope you will look favorably upon that request. Next slide. So in summary, the department has submitted a recommended budget with a 3.3% reduction of just over $1 million. Also taking into account there's about a $1.7 million offset through a staffing grant to offset our attrition rate. And so there'll be about a $2.7 million cost avoidance to the residents and the taxpayers. And so, our job is to manage this department in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement and personnel rules. And I believe that we'll be able to accomplish that with this recommended budget. Next slide. Any questions? This is a photograph. I'd like to give credit to Andy Hart from Hartford News. Beautiful photograph of the city of Hartford.
Thank you. Councilman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. Good afternoon, Chief.
Afternoon.
I don't know why my mic's not working too well. I don't ask that many questions for it to be beat down like this, but get through it. Thank you for your presentation. Just wanted to kind of follow up on a couple things that you and I have been working with. I know CERT has been with the Special Services Unit. I was hoping that you would put it up on the big screen there and talk about the successes that we've had with CERT as an implementation, getting more community involved, and talk about the assets that we were able to tap into for the blizzard, and then go into the final blizzard report. I attended the meeting where we kind of went through and did a reassessment of what took place at the blizzard as far as cost procedures, and then having an actual plan to kind of address that kind of a blizzard. We haven't had that blizzard in like 30-something years. But so can you talk to those two things? Number one, CERT, and the importance that this will continue after you're gone. And then number two, the final report for the blizzard as a wrap-up.
I would have loved to have added that to the slide, but I knew you were going to come out with it.
Okay.
But, I know CERT is dear to you and dear to the city, and as emergency manager, CERT is a valuable resource to me. As our resources get taxed based on overtaxed due to whatever the incident is, we'd like to be able to count on our citizens to step forward and help the city of Hartford in a time of need. CERT had went through a little bit of a reorganization, and we needed some leadership. There were some labor issues that had to be addressed. We met with the Capital Region Council of Governments, made sure everybody was on the same page, labor management initiatives, and we have some momentum. We have momentum going with CERT. And as a matter of fact, I spoke with the assistant chief today, who will be assuming the duties of acting chief or interim chief of the department, and we both are in strong agreement of the importance of CERT and continuing this momentum. We have a long way to go, but we're headed in the right direction. We had some after-action conferences related to Blizzard 2013. Out of those two conferences and the data that we collected and analyzed, a report was put together and delivered to the mayor. So the mayor has a final report which talks about our pre-event, our actions during the event, and our recovery. And we also have the section on the strengths and areas of improvement for the Emergency Operations Center. So all functions of government were looked at. We looked at all of our strengths, all of our areas of improvement. We've put it down on paper, and that document has been submitted to the mayor's office for review.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up question, sir. The new public safety complex is an outstanding building, like you said, and I'm glad you brought attention to the other two firehouses. But I want to bring attention to Jewel Street, what's happening over there, and then I guess your special services like your marine operations and some of the specialized services will understand that they have to be housed at that location.
Well, currently, the Pearl Street Fire Station.
Pearl Street,
where
I'm sorry.
Jewel Street, Pearl Street,
Yep.
on that block. 275 Pearl Street was the former fire headquarters.
Correct.
It's currently being utilized as a response building. Emergency response vehicles run out of there. Our tactical unit, which is now training to become a heavy rescue unit. We have our marine unit. We have our hazardous materials unit, response unit that rides out of there, decontamination unit, our District 1. So we have almost a regional, our regional assets are in that building. So we had put together a asset relocation plan in anticipation of the closing of that building. We found in that plan, our relocation plan found that in the other fire station that was identified to house those assets, the weight of the floor would not accommodate what we planned on doing there, and it didn't accommodate what we had in there. We had to remove what was in that station for the safety of its occupants and the building and the neighborhood. So we had to relocate assets that were in there to another station, which floor did not have a floor. So it would support the weight. So now in this capital improvement plan, we're hoping to shore up Main and Belden, the floor at Main and Belden, so it could support the weight of our asset relocation plan. So down the line, the goal of the city, from what I understood, was to have that part of that property as part of a redevelopment plan. It's called Downtown West. And it encompasses that property. And so we understand the importance of that property to the economic or development or redevelopment of the city of Hartford. And but right now, we have nowhere to place these regional assets. And to be a leader in the region, you must have somewhere to house and respond from with those assets.
One final question. Looking at the certification, the Class A Fire Department, how do we maintain that level of excellence after you're gone? You talked about training. Will that also help us to maintain that level of performance, being a Class A kind of operation, and certification too?
You know, the last time the Insurance Service Organization came into the city of Hartford to rate its class rating, it came out with a Class 1, but barely. And it was done, the shortcomings were in training. Our training was not documented. I was not chief at the time, but our training was not documented, and so we could not prove that the training that's required was being done. I have this saying, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. If you can't show it on paper, it didn't happen. What we have instituted are systems that document every training component that goes on in the city, whether it's at our academy or in the fire station. They are designated to do a certain amount of training per day, per shift, and we review that on a monthly basis at our fire stat meeting. So that component itself, everything else, our ability to, our water supply, our dispatch system, those components are strong. Our weakness was in our documentation of our training, and we have fixed that. So we have, based on their rating schedule, I see no problems in the future of maintaining that Class 1 rating.
When do we get reevaluated as a class, or for our certification, I should say?
Well, currently the ISO is undergoing a change in their scheduling, their rating schedule. So they've had departments participate as a beta department, which we were one. And so we took that opportunity to use what they were proposing as a rating schedule change to apply to our own. And we're not seeing any problems. Their scheduling goes around depending on what's going on in the nation. After Charleston, South Carolina lost 9 folks, they were a Class 1 department. They lost 9 people in a sofa fire, in a furniture store fire. They were a Class 1 department, and the ISO looked at everybody. They looked at everybody. So, you know, usually between 5 and 10 years, but depending on if something like that were to occur, they look at everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Councilman Anderson. Councilman
Thank you for
Kennedy.
your
Thank you.
I don't know if that's an insult to Kyle, but
Happens all the time.
I apologize to Kyle for that. There are worse things, though. Good afternoon. We're on day 3, I guess. Having a little bit of the drag over, or a little bit of the hangover.
4.
4, I'm sorry, day 4. Shows you where I'm at. Fire administration and the budget detail. Looking again at overtime. Most of my questions will probably focus on overtime. As you're looking through your pages, I'll just give you the first question. In the fire administration, which is 21100, looking at the overtime, which is 510,351 on page 19. I want to applaud the department for really getting a hold of the overtime costs and in its recommended budget, making zeroing out several overtime expenditures. But what I'm concerned about is that we adopted first shift overtime in fire administration of about, let's just say roughly $12,000. Actual to date is already 25, more than double. And next year we've just completely zeroed it out. How's that possible?
The bottom line is the department was taking a look at how are we doing business. My charge was to look at each line item and look at things that we can do without. There are things that we need to learn how to provide the same service more efficiently. And some of the services that we were providing were done under overtime. We looked at some of those functions and some of those services that we needed to deliver and decided that we could wait till Monday. We could wait till Monday. There's some things administratively that can wait till Monday if it happened on a Friday night or a Saturday. And so the sacrifices to everybody is we're going to find a way to do the same service but differently, and with that, we can zero out the overtime in administration, in the chief's office.
Going to page 20, going to the Emergency Services Division, 211001. Looking again at the first shift overtime. Again, I wanted to applaud the department of making a reduction of over $1 million in the overtime account. And I just want to be sure that we can live up to that when we pass the budget. We adopted 1.9. Right now to date, we're at 2.1 million. But I guess the budget is under 900,000. Again, with the 54+% reduction in overtime, again, which I like, I just want to make sure we can live up to that goal and that it's realistic.
We have recently put on, in 2 years, 81 individuals. We just put on a class of 51. Once we put that class on April 1st, our overtime came almost to a screeching halt. Based on those numbers, on the staffing levels that we currently have, and then looking at our attrition level, we should be fine through this coming fiscal year, 13-14, throughout the fiscal year, and then we're going to need to look at a test and new hiring in 2014, 14-15.
Just so I'm clear, in terms of the understanding, Carmen, it's okay.
She loves your questioning.
And I love Carmen, so.
You know, the department we can't have both staffing and overtime. When you staff to the appropriate level or overstaff, the overtime is going to drop.
Well, and that's my question. So the answer to the overtime issues is sometimes that we're experiencing when we look at our budgets are all staffing issues.
They're all in our overtime. You know, it took about a year for me to figure out, through we did studies with M&B, HR, finance, and it took about a year to figure out what was the originator of overtime. And we came up with a management strategy of promoting promoting individuals to vacant spots saved overtime. And then, but in top of that, we had to also have a candidate pool of candidates at the firefighter level that can fill up to the captain's position if those positions are out, and don't have to fill those on overtime.
So the time and a half overtime that was completely zeroed out from the, which we budgeted as zero out, we budgeted as zero last year, and we're now at 319,000. You're saying with the staffing levels, that's gonna zero out actually in the next upcoming budget?
Yes, the time and a half only kicks in when firefighters work more than 212 hours in a 28-day cycle. With the current staffing level, that won't be happening, so there's no need to have a time and a half overtime. When they work overtime, it's straight time overtime.
And looking at the community risk reduction division, and looking at not just the overtime numbers, well, I'll ask the question this way. We budgeted 103,289. To date, you're actually substantially below that number at 82. And now we've recommended the same number going into the community risk reduction division. How come the staffing levels haven't reduced over time here?
That division is staffed by one captain and 2 lieutenants. A lot of their work happens after hours. NRZs, fire relocations, events during the weekends. A lot of their work happens after hours. We did a tabulation the other day of the amount of work they're doing, and it averaged year to date, fiscal year to date. If they just came to work normally, they'd be working about 1,440 hours. We have employees that have worked over 2,500 hours. And so a lot of their work is after hours. And that work leads to the decrease in fires, injuries. We do car seat installations. They do the bicycle safety. They do every risk injury prevention strategy that's out there. And a lot of that happens when people are available.
Pick that up. So it's a 3-person division then?
Yes.
Okay, when I look at the regular,
Excuse me, just a point of clarification. In the budget book, it indicates 12 FTEs for the
Yes.
Community Risk Reduction Division.
Right. The community risk reduction is a combination of 2 divisions. We consolidated the fire prevention or the fire marshal's office and the special services division. So those two divisions comprise community risk reduction. And so there are 3 in special services and 8, 9, so there's a total of 12.
Okay, all right, Councilman.
So there's two divisions in one. We consolidated it, and so there are that amount of FTEs.
that was my next question, so I can skip to the special events overtime. We budgeted 0 last year. We're budgeting again 0 this year, but the actual for this year, let's just call it 128,000. What will be the difference, since we've just described it as a 3-person unit, and if they're the folks who generally do the overtime, what will be the difference in terms of having no, the way you described it, I don't see how we get around overtime in this specific category.
Well, I see the confusion. That line item should be in emergency services. That is special event. Those are special event dollars for our suppression personnel, or if you're at the parks or riverfront recapture or the parades, we staff emergency medical response vehicles. They look like golf carts, and we staff parades, events at the park, so that we could provide the emergency medical care that's required if there was an injury. Sometimes those events close streets, impact our response times, and so those dollars should be in emergency services. They're in the wrong place.
Okay, so, and then that why, so we should add the emergency services, the special events and emergency services overtime to the overtime category in emergency service division, which is 510351. So community risk reduction overtime should be combined with emergency services division overtime, correct?
The special event line for overtime should be in the emergency services division.
Okay, all right, that's,
Where right now it shows 31, there's a line in there under emergency services, 510366. It shows 31 or 32.5, and so it should be in that line. That's where it really belongs. That special event that's in community risk reduction doesn't belong there. It's in the wrong program.
okay, I just want to be clear that the special event 510366,
Yes,
that's at 127,659, that should be in emergency services division overtime?
yes,
Okay. And 510367, which is, again, zeroed out this year, and it looks like we haven't spent any money in that. I'm assuming that's appropriately where it is.
no. That should also be, though both of those should be in emergency services.
Just a few more questions. Again, the fire training, you had a substantial reduction in overtime. Would the rationale be the same because of the staffing levels?
Yes. No, it's not, no, I'm sorry, it's not the staffing levels. It's, again, we looked at what services can we deliver and can we wait till Monday?
Okay. So the, and fire training, okay. And in the fire alarm communications, it looks like technical. You reduced your overtime again by about 54%. Is that a staffing level issue there, or?
Nope, it's looking at a better way of doing business.
Okay. Wanted to ask you about minimum manning requirement. The minimum manning requirement, which is 4 on a truck, if that did not exist, would we be able to go out and get smaller trucks for our first responder units instead of, sending out the big fire truck?
There's more to it than the minimum manning or the minimum staffing.
Okay.
The collective bargaining agreement calls for the staffing of 11 engines, 5 ladders, the tactical unit, and 2 deputy chiefs. So you have to have those staffed. So you would have to have those staffed at minimum staffing, whatever it was, say it was lower than 4. If you had it lower than 4, you would just have to send more resources.
I'll tell you specifically what I'm trying to get at is, one, we need to look at finding revenue streams. Do the paramedic work yourselves rather than shipping it out on a contract basis as a potential source of revenue. To do that, the firefighters are our first responders. So how do we get to exploiting that potential source of revenue, providing the quality service from Hartford, and still meet all the minimum manning requirements and save our trucks? I mean, our trucks get 3 miles to the gallon, from my understanding. We take those big bad boys out, and, they could be going to a response for a broken leg. And I'm not sure that's always the best use of taxpayer dollar if we actually had a paramedic unit division within fire that could do that. I'm not trying to necessarily change a minimum manning requirement, but the explanation I always got on why we couldn't send out a smaller crew of 2 on a, like ambulance kind of truck or something smaller, was because of the minimum manning requirement. That truck would require 4 and not 2, and I don't know if that's correct or not.
You have to have 11 engines.
Okay.
11 engine companies. So if you wanted to if you took one of those engine companies out of service and put 2 individuals in a smaller vehicle, by collective bargaining agreement, the obligation is to continue to staff that with 4. So the way to accomplish that is possibly supplementing the department. which is not cost effective. It's not what we're trying to do. The transport, the paramedic services and the transport is revenue that the city can benefit from. I think some type of task force should sit down and try to figure out what steps are required. One of the steps that are required is obtaining what's called the PSA. There's a bill of legislation now that will allow municipalities to own their service areas, their primary service areas. Right now it's owned by AMR. AMR owns the Hartford's PSA. So if we're not satisfied with their service and we wanted to do it ourselves, we could do that with adoption of this bill that's at the state capitol now. So municipalities are looking at ways to enhance revenue. The fire service does this well, and I'm sure that we could find a way to get there. But before Hartford takes it over, we must be ready to take it over, which requires an investment. And so I think a task force put together to try to decide what steps are required, what revenues can we anticipate, and what will be the cost benefit to that program.
Just a follow-up question with respect to that. When you say 11 engines, how many firehouses do we have in the city of Hartford?
We have 12 fire stations. 17 companies run out of those 12 stations.
And we only have those 12 fire station buildings, right?
We have
Those 12
16 fire department buildings.
fire department buildings.
Yes. But 12 buildings are where emergency response vehicles are dispatched from.
All right. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Councilman De Jesus.
I think it's more in line with Councilman Kennedy's line of questioning. It seems that in the past few years, since you guys have taken over the first response, that has predominantly been the job of the of the fire department. About 68% of your work is responding to first responder calls, and yet I don't think we're. It just seems odd to send out these big trucks out there. Have we thought about how our response time can increase by consolidating, or what is the patterns? Has there been any thought to accommodate more of what you guys are doing now, comparable to probably 10 to 15 years now that you guys took over the first responders? I mean, what steps have you guys taken to adapt to this new line of work that you guys have acquired?
Well, we've been doing first responders since I think it was 2000, May of 2000. So it's been 13 years now that we've taken on the EMS portion of first responder, and the department saw our workload increase almost 250% in that first year. The department has adapted very well. The department does well at what they're trained in. That's the key to this department. They do very well at what they're trained in. Whichever way, there are better ways to provide the service. There are ways to enhance revenue or to recover cost. I think a serious discussion at the table with all the players, labor, management, especially labor, to look at ideas and best practices on how the city of Hartford can best benefit as we provide this valuable service. We get on scene 4 minutes 90% of the time. They can be dead asleep at 2 in the morning, get the alarm, and be at the front door in 4 minutes 90% of the time. I can't do that out of my bed. They can do it. And so it doesn't matter what type of vehicle they're in, they're going to get there and provide the best pre-hospital care that's available in the region. We have an opportunity to provide a service and to possibly get some revenue from it if we look at another way of doing it. And some serious discussion at the table with all the stakeholders, I think is the first start.
Also, and I've seen a few scenes. Actually, I passed by today by the fire at the West End. I think congestion in our emergency scenes, predominantly congestion by the fire department. I think we've been lucky that we've been able to not have major episodes of emergencies here in the city, but congestion seems to be a huge problem with these big trucks when responding to a call. You have about 120-foot long apparatus. It takes about the same space, about 3 different vehicles, and only about 4 people get out of these trucks. The safety concerns, has that ever been a problem? I do see that it could be a major problem if a major emergency event happens in the city because of the congestions of our streets and the size of these trucks. Has that come up to mind?
Our data doesn't show that has impacted our response or our ability to mitigate incidents. The way we respond to areas of the city are not just one way. Our distribution and concentration of our assets is set up so we can approach from strategically almost every side of that property. So you might see 2 fire trucks riding down the street. They'll be going to the same incident. One will take a left and one will take a right because they pre-plan those routes. And they understand the congestion. They understand the time of day. They understand if it's during school, if there are school buses. They understand the environment that they're responding to, and they take the appropriate steps. They always have a backup. We always have a backup.
Over the last summer, I attended one in New Orleans, a safety training, and one of the major issues for like Dallas, Austin, has been the congestion. Because what happens is usually in a traffic scene, we have a traffic accident or you have a pedestrian hit, the congestions of the vehicles ties up the highways, it ties up the streets, causing sometimes other issues related to that one, and it has resulted to major lawsuits for cities, major cities. I think we're pretty good in size, but I think is one of my concerns of making sure that a traffic scene or emergency scene is not as congested as I've seen in the city of Hartford. So I think we should definitely set up that task force that you mentioned to look at how we can consolidate and be more efficient with space, especially in our city streets. Thank you.
Councilwoman Jennings.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. Chief, thank you for your presentation. I know that I think we've had this discussion with members of your department, but I really want to hear it from you. A huge percentage of our city is parkland, a lot of trees, and my concern has always been whether or not there was a fire, a possibility of a brush fire, because a brush fire or a wildfire in Hartford would take out a huge part of the city. I know that Windsor has a truck that's specially designed to fight brush fires. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we don't have that same vehicle. Can you tell me, number one, are we at risk? And number two, especially with that October storm where a lot of trees are now dead tinder. And number two, do we now have a truck that fights brush, or do we have hydrants and water supplies in the parks?
We do not have a brush vehicle. In our risk analysis of the city and our high-risk areas, we found that our parks, when we're looking at wildland fires, which is a phenomenon that happens mainly in the West Coast, and you have the Santa Ana winds and the humidity and those issues, we don't have conditions here in Hartford where a brush fire would turn into what you are seeing in San Diego or what's going on in the West Coast. We can have in about 8 minutes, the first unit gets there in 4, we can have about 2,000 gallons of water on scene without a hydrant. So the apparatus that are responding, each carry about 500 gallons of water. They have about 1,200 feet of hose each. So, I mean, anywhere in the park, we can relay. Our water pressure is fantastic in the city at the hydrants. So we can do what's called a relay from one pumper, from the hydrant to another engine to the scene of the fire, and we can keep a constant flow of water. So unless the infrastructure or the water supply goes down, we're not in danger of a wildland or conflagration as you're seeing in the West Coast. What's critical in maintaining that or keeping those risks down is that our partners in the Department of Public Works and their maintenance of those parks. When branches are down, leaves are down, the fuel package, if it's available and there's some carelessness going on in the parks, then we, of course, will have some brush fires. They've been doing very well with us. We're not concerned. The fuel packages have been decreased. We have water there in minutes. So anything that happens in the park, we feel we can control. But those are issues that we're always assessing. And then we look at what resources do we need to meet the risk that we have identified. So that's a process that goes on constantly through the department's joint Health and Safety Committee, which is a collaboration of labor and management looking at issues such as that. How do we address high-rise fires? How do we address cellar fires? Anything that has to do with the safety of our residents, preventing fires, we're always assessing those conditions and bringing recommendations for policy.
Thank you.
Councilman Cruz.
Good afternoon, and through the chair. My question is just a verification or clarification. Page 22-6, when it comes to the number of EMS calls, to be clear, is that in conjunction with the 911? And it's part of the same budget, or are these different calls?
The dispatch handles about 25,000 EMS calls. We respond to through their triage, their processing of calls, they make a decision whether to send fire. So there's about 25,000 total emergency medical calls or 911 calls. Of those 25,000, about 15,000 of those are dispatched to fire. Fire is dispatched to respond to those. So when I said, when we took over EMS in 2000, our workload went up about 250%. It was because we went to everything. And so we looked at, there are some things we don't need to go to. And so those policies were established. And as you see, we don't go to every call, but we go to a majority of those calls.
Just a follow-up question. And so once those calls are screened by 911 and they get to the department, is there a way that you guys distinguish which budget or what? Where is that going, or it all goes to one?
Where is that line item was again 22 what?
Well, it's on page 22-6, but it's just a question as far as the way that's paid for, the EMS services that get to your department?
It's encompassed in the entire Emergency Services Division budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Councilman Deutsch.
Thank you, and through the chair. Forgive me if you could, if some of this has been gone over, but if I could first clarify this. Of the medically related calls, let's say the EMS calls, the 15,000 or so, and I assume that to most of those, there are either one or two fire apparatus equipment responses, vehicles, one or two. What portion of those responses then need another vehicle for transport, like an ambulance?
The way it currently works is depending on the nature of the call. A medical call could be a motor vehicle accident, pedestrian hit, motor vehicle accident on the highway. Those are separate response allocations, meaning if we were on the highway, we're going to send more vehicles because we need to block some lanes. We need to provide safety for our individuals. If it's on the street corner, a normal fender bender, report of injuries, we have to have, there's a patient care ratio, 2 individuals for every patient. So based on the information that we receive, that dispatch receives, if they get a report of 3 injuries, we know we need 6 people. In order to get 6 people, you need to send 2 pieces of apparatus. There's fluids on the ground, there's disconnection of the power source, there's stabilization of the vehicle. There's many critical tasks that have to go on other than caring for the patient, stabilizing the patient. We package the patient, we stabilize, and then we turn them over to our ambulance service that's contracted by the city, either AMR or Aetna.
Yeah, but maybe I didn't explain right. It's just like a math question. If you send out a certain number of EMS responses, do, let's say, 3/4 of them result in a need then to call an ambulance once the site is stabilized, or half, or 90?
You're looking for the percentage of EMS calls that we respond to that require a transport.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll have to get you that data. I'll look at that.
Well-
We'll have to search for that. I can't give you that right now.
Could you say, roughly speaking, it's more than half, I would assume,
I
or
would
maybe
assume,
not?
yeah, I would assume.
So in other words,
Most folks, whether they're displaying any symptoms or not, most folks go on the side of caution and go for precautionary reasons. So we might be able to give you the data of how many transports we have gotten, but the majority require, if someone's calling 911 and we're responding in more than one vehicle, chances are, from what I hear on the radio, there's 70 to 80% of the time, there's an ambulance there.
so you see, what I'm trying to get at, it's like a follow-up to Councilman Kennedy's question as to whether we could scale down the number of fire apparatus trucks that are sent and send maybe 1 or no firefighting vehicles and just go ahead and send an ambulance when you get a report like that, so you have a smaller vehicle that can respond to the medical emergency directly with transport, and that means a little quicker to the hospital, I suppose. So I hear what you're saying about the response of 1 or 2 major vehicles, but what about a model where you just have some SUVs or some vehicles capable of just getting there and transporting them back once they're stabilized without the fire truck?
We don't know until we arrive on scene what level of services our caller requires.
I
There
understand.
could be an extrication, there could be people trapped. We need specialized equipment, people who are specially trained to extricate folks from vehicles. We might have fluids on the grounds. We need lines laid. We need to block block lanes to provide safety or barricades to for our personnel. So until we get on scene, I think it would not be good service to send a vehicle, say a scout vehicle, to see what's going on, because time is of an essence there. We take pride in getting there and in a timely fashion and providing that pre-hospital care that stabilizes that person who's in need. And I'm not in favor of delaying that type of response, because when our folks are in trouble, they know they can count on us, and we get there. You know, if I have people tell me, where were you, right around the corner? I mean, we get there that quick.
Okay, well, of course, I think most people understand that and really appreciate it. It then just comes to the question of the role for a smaller sized vehicle, and whether, for instance, that can replace a second major vehicle if two are being sent out. You see, and again, I don't pretend to be an expert on that, but it's...
And, you know, in theory it sounds, but in application, we need the bodies on scene to provide that 2-to-1 patient care ratio, the vehicle stabilization if the majority are motor vehicle accidents. That vehicle needs to be stabilized. That vehicle needs to be made safe. Our people need to be protected by providing barricades or barriers. We need to take care of the fluids. We need to take care of the person that's in the vehicle.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if I may ask one other question, which is more staffing, and again, forgive me if you've already answered it. If there are budget cuts coming for the department, I say that if, you know, nobody knows, how many will come from overtime? What portion of those will come from the overtime? I know you touched on that before, but if you just try to say it simply, if there are budget cuts, how much of that will come out of overtime?
Out of the police overtime budget?
No, fire. No, fire overtime. Did I say that? Did I say?
Did you
I
say the
slip?
police overtime budget? I have an obligation to adhere to a collective bargaining agreement. And what I have recommended to the mayor, what's been recommended is what we need in order to comply with that collective bargaining agreement. And the safety of our citizens and our personnel. And I can't see, I mean, we worked on this budget for months, probably harder than any budget, I know harder than any budget that I've worked on. There is no more. There's nothing left. Going into any further cuts will jeopardize our personnel and will jeopardize the members of this community, our visitors and our residents. They pay for service, we deliver great service.
So in other words, fine. So there's no way, you're saying it's not possible to say that if the total were decreased, if, again, which I'm not, whether a portion of, what portion would come from the overtime that's budgeted as opposed to the regular full-time staffing? Is there any way to predict that so we see where if there is economizing, if it's from the overtime or the full-time?
I can't see it. If there's a staffing reduction and we lose folks, then we jeopardize some staffing grants, which will jeopardize $3.4 million that has to be repaid to the federal government. So if we fall below a certain staffing level, we have a collective bargaining agreement that mandates how we are to staff when we have shortages. We've done a position-by-position analysis of what is the least amount that we could live with overtime. And in 2010, it was $3.5 million. In fiscal year 13-14, it's $1 million. There's no more. There's nothing else to take.
Thank you. Chief, thank you very much for your presentation, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
The great Department of Public Works is next. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I was late.
No problem. And,
We lost our.
I guess we're going to hear from Jose Sanchez, who will fill in and talk about the Department of Public Works until our director is here.
Tipping fees are down.
Come on. This is a moment for you to distinguish yourself in your performance evaluation, impersonating the Department of Public
Tap
Works
dance or do
Director.
something, right?
Here we go.
Here we go. Good evening. I want Kevin Burnham here, the Director of Public Works, is going to do his presentation this evening, and I see he has a number of his staff members present, so I'll let him do the introductions.
Yep. Good evening. Let's get this a little closer. Good evening, Council President Wooden, Majority
Good evening.
Leader Ponte, Minority Leader Deutsch, and distinguished council members.
Excuse me. Why don't you move the mic a little closer?
Oh, all right. Is that better?
Yep. Great.
Okay. Here with me tonight to present the fiscal 13-14 recommended budget for Public Works are a number of members of my staff, my Deputy Ron Maurice Carroll, my fiscal lead, Fiscal Manager India Cicero, City Architect Tony Matta, City Engineer Constantine Telescu, and J.R. Maldonado from Operations, and Mark Fontaine from Fleet. How could I forget Petrel? Everybody knows Petrel, so I figure that goes without saying. Having trouble advancing it? Do you want to try to? I got another. Oh, there we go. I'll go anyway. You probably have this in front of you. Our proposed budget is just over 13 million. It represents a 359,012 or 2.7% decrease from last year. The net decrease is a result of split funding of our LS&I positions, centralizing some capital items in the capital budget, and a reduction in overtime expenditures offset by contractual salary increases. The mission of Public Works aligns with Mayor's goal number 2, addressing the quality of life by focusing on the eradication of blight and focusing on infrastructure improvement and maintenance. Shown here are the core activities performed by our 11 divisions. Our operational divisions provide essential services to residents and businesses, maintaining core infrastructure. This slide highlights the wide scope of what our department manages and maintains. I would like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to the hardworking and dedicated employees of the department, especially the frontline workers of AFSCME Local 1716 who make up the bulk of the operations staff. They work to provide these functions throughout all seasons and weather, and quite often do not get the credit they deserve. In the area of capital project delivery, our staff of engineers, architects, technical and administrative support staff manage nearly 100 projects with a value over $360 million. These projects are major investments in the quality of life for our residents. And in the last year, we have also improved our GIS capabilities to more efficiently manage our operations and infrastructure assets. We have a number of initiatives that further improve the delivery of our core services, improve the quality of life, and provide opportunities for city residents. First and foremost, I am excited about our training and job creation initiatives. I am most appreciative of the efforts and support of our Chief Operating Officer, Sandra P. Borges, in the program development, as we have met regularly over the past year to develop it. These programs will create meaningful jobs and develop marketable skills that will provide opportunity for future advancement, with the hope that there will be a progressive path for positions in engineering, project management, and other professional occupations within the department. In support of the Mayor's goal to also create these opportunities in the private sector, I have directed my staff to incorporate goals for local hiring and right-sized projects to encourage participation by smaller local firms. We continue to expand and develop our partnerships related to our park system that is a true jewel of our city. The focus is to provide fully programmed parks spaces to provide positive activity and see that our parks are a safe place for all. We also continue to make progress and improvements to leverage technology for increased performance and productivity in our operations. We have invested over $5 million in our fleet to provide new equipment for snow operations, sanitation collection, forestry services, and street repairs. And we have initiated a detailed analysis of maintenance standards and procedures to determine optimal staffing levels and best maintenance practices. The initial focus has been our facilities and parks. While a detailed analysis is not complete, initial projections shown here demonstrate the dramatic difference in the optimal staffing levels to achieve our desired level of service and our actual available staff. This results in reduced performance and customer dissatisfaction, and the deferred maintenance will ultimately undermine our infrastructure investment. We will be performing a similar detailed analysis of our parks, which will include developing improved operating procedures and performance expectations for the park maintenance program. To begin to address these deficiencies in staff-to-work ratios, we have hired 28 seasonal employees as permanent and added another 30 maintainer positions in this recommended budget, and all those will be Hartford residents. And with that, I thank you, and we'll look forward to your questions.
Leader Aponte.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilman Kennedy will be asking the financial questions, so I'll ask some recycling questions. I know that mattresses, or I've read that mattresses cost towns about $1,200,000 a year across the state of Connecticut. And of course, Hartford has its share of costs related to mattresses. How are we doing with changing that legislation so that the cost goes from the taxpayer to the manufacturer.
I know that as we speak, they are trying to put that legislation through now, and I think it is hopefully coming to a vote tonight, and we'll see if that's successful, which will put the burden on manufacturers and less so on the municipality.
Along those same lines, are we working on what I call a paint stewardship program so we can recycle paint?
I believe that we are working in a lot of those areas in terms of paint, textiles, a lot of the recyclable products. We are trying to find opportunities to get these out of our waste stream, and also, again, these are areas where we can find employment opportunities, hopefully for residents with facilities in the city.
We have an e-recycling program, and this is a personal story. I take my old printer, put it in the trunk of my car, drive down to City Hall because we used to have boxes here, and I'm so happy that I'm going to recycle, and I open up the trunk, pick up this heavy printer, and the box is gone. Is it temporary or is the box coming back?
We always will do different recycling through City Hall, but there's always the ability to go up to the transfer station for those items.
With the printer in my trunk, should I wait for the box here, or do I go to transfer station?
I think you might want to go to the transfer station.
Well, we were at the budget hearings, the public budget hearings at Buckley. Was that 2 weeks ago or a week ago?
Week ago.
Okay, it was a week ago, but it seems like it was years ago. But the public kept asking or commenting about having more workers at Public Works, that there seems to be a tangible benefit to the public from having more workers there. Not that I can promise any more money for more workers, but if you got a little bit more, how would you distribute that money? What would you do with that money?
Well, I mean, as you saw by the few slides that we showed at the end there, just in custodial alone, we are about 24 employees deficient in that area. And it basically would go into operational staff for maintainers and particularly skilled trades people there, where we many times only have 1 or 2 positions per trade. So those are be critical areas that we'd be looking at.
And my last question has to do with cemeteries. You're in charge of cemeteries, right?
That's correct.
I had a constituent who contacted me regarding Old North Cemetery. The statement was that the administration had set aside $1 million for all cemeteries, or was it just Old North?
For all cemeteries, there was a project that already had been completed in Old North, but there is let me check the number for next year.
It's for more than one cemetery.
3.1 million.
There is okay. So there was, we have done initial projects already in Old North, but now there is, over the next 5 years, there's $1 million in cemetery improvements for all city cemeteries.
All right, and I know that this is information pretty technical, and you probably don't have a response, but if you could get back to me. They particularly talk about the 29th Regiment, which was a Civil War regiment, and they're indicating that the headstones have been neglected. So if I could get some information to respond to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, we do have different monument restoration at a kind of as a priority basis, in which are the most likely to deteriorate, but we'll follow up on that as far as it deals with the 29th.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilman Kennedy.
Thank you. Through the Council President, good evening.
Good evening.
Let's start with the DPW waste recycling. Page 41, which is section 6, if you're looking in the mayor's budget proposal, which is 25.2. Page 41 of the budget detail, 311006, 510501. We're going to put in for part-time employees $443,900. That's a lot of part-timers. I mean, besides the obvious fact that we could have some contractual issues with that kind of expense for part-timers, it was zero last year in that budget line, and it's gone from zero to basically $444,000.
Yes, that actually should be in the parks area. It was in this budget. It was shown in the sanitation, but it was meant to be in parks. And so those would be for seasonal employees in parks division.
It's your budget, and you submitted it, because we'll look at the parks line now. Page 42. Again, 311007, it's subsection 7 in the budget book, and in the budget detail it's 510501. I've noticed that, yes, you spent $423,719 in part-time employees this year, but next year you've budgeted only 176 there. So is the budget for next year, according to your testimony, going to be 176 plus the 440,000? Part-time employees there?
Yes.
Are we increasing full-time employees anywhere?
Yes, in both cases. We are, the number was,
Here, I got it for you.
it was 10.
Well, get back to me with where they are and what they're doing. The concern I have is with respect to the parks.
Yeah, so that was 10.
Rhonda, feel free to join him.
What's that?
Rhonda, I said Rhonda, she can come up, because I saw Rhonda said, you know, in terms of what we need to get done.
No, there's, in that for the next year we're talking about, there were 20 positions, 10 which were going to be the 24-month, and 10 that were going to be the full-time. And we had an additional group that were coming out of CIP. So we will.
Here's where I'm going with this. How many people do we have cutting grass for parks in the city of Hartford?
We have an overall, let me show you where that is here.
My understanding is the number could be as low as 2, but I mean, I could be wrong.
No. But we have, but to that point, there is for the total acreage of 1,861 and 33 ball fields, we're talking about 10, 17, 23, parks employees for all that acreage. So it is a significant number, and that's why you see those type of employees in those areas, and we are looking at those employees to be in ball field maintenance and horticulture and forestry.
Okay, those 23 employees that you're citing, are they responsible for other duties other than just the maintenance of the half of our square miles, which is parks? Are they, I mean, do they have other duties beyond grass for the parks?
Those are the maintainers that are in the parks division, and we often will, as we are through these past weeks, we have been supplementing parks with employees from other divisions.
And I'm hearing you. My question is, I think you understand my question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are dedicated to parks. Yeah.
They do other things besides what we're talking about right now, those 23 employees?
Not during the park season, no. They are in parks. In the snow, in the winter, they might be shoveling and plowing, but they are they are doing parks.
So during the entire spring season, we're not talking about fall, we got 23 people cutting grass and maintaining park.
Yes.
My question then is, because we often have difficulty during the summer, at least every year since I've been on council. I will get a phone call about one park inevitably. Not been covered with terms of just basic maintenance. So what is the plan to avoid that this year?
That is, as I said at the end of my presentation there, we are doing a number of things. One, immediately we know that there's deficiencies there, so that's why we have asked for the additional maintainers that we have asked for. And we are doing in-depth analysis of particularly the parks and facilities of the manpower needs by park. And we are also developing maintenance procedures and standards so that we can better optimize the staffing and document to the administration and council what needs there are in the parks.
Okay, because I guess when I'm looking at what we've got in a budget detail for ground maintenance supplies, looks like we're looking at 1,700, recreation supplies, 16,006. Landscaping, it looks like we budgeted for 10,000. I guess my point is, for as much as we have in terms of park space, that's not a lot of resources. And that's just a concern. I mean, I know the budget's tight, we all do, but I'm wondering, how are we going to be able to maintain one of our greatest assets, very small budget, when I'm looking at some of the actual details that go into W Park budget?
Not unlike some of the other budgets that we've been talking about, we have moved a number of the items that qualify as capital to the capital budget. So when we look at the capital budget, a lot of the things that you mentioned are things that we actually can pay for out of the capital budget.
Okay. If I could,
and we can provide for the council a list of types of items, if that would be helpful, that qualify as capital, so that you at least have some general idea about the kinds of things that we have put in that particular item in the capital budget called capital items.
Yeah, I would be very interested, and obviously this is coming up with a number of the departments with a comprehensive, if we can get a comprehensive list on what's been moved out of
Yes.
traditional operating side budget to the capital improvement.
We can certainly provide that, yes.
Okay, great.
I'm looking at DPW traffic, which is page 39, subsection, I believe, 3 in your budget book. I'm assuming this is for street maintenance?
No, that would be, street maintenance would be in street services.
Okay, so what
But
does
this would
DPW
be-
traffic specifically do?
This would be more traffic control devices, signs and markings.
Okay, so for traffic signs and markings, we've budgeted 15,000, which is adequate, but why do we take and zero out street and bridges and walks? Which is a reduction from last year's recommended budget of about $50,000.
This could very well be the same thing. These are hardware that lasts for more than a year and cost over $1,000 and can be capitalized based on standard accounting practices.
DP engineering and architectural. The regular payroll and that. Page 38.
Yep.
Recommended budget for this is $734,000. Last year's adopted was $622, but right now you're below that. I guess my question is, why are we increasing engineering and architectural versus where I think maybe some of that money might be better used in parks and actual and maintenance? So I mean, I could be wrong in terms of what their function is. I just want to know what the thinking is there.
Yeah, and some of it is, we do have, as we spoke of in the presentation, a large capital program, and that's what these positions are managing. And also, we do have some positions that we're adding that are doing inspection work, street and road cuts and that nature.
Okay. Let's talk about the parks. Did the capital improvement plan with respect to Dillon. Let's talk about Cole Park. What's going on with Cole Park with respect to the irrigation and the fields that currently exist? In that park in terms of the maintenance, because as we've had several conversations about this, Colt's in bad shape. What are we doing to improve it? What's the plan there?
Well, I'll let Tony talk about some of the capital improvements, but also what we're doing is we are looking at an entire turf management plan, doing soil testing, seeing what we need for aeration, and there are currently studies underway to do that for Colt and other park athletic fields through the system. And I don't know if, Tony, you have any particular things to add about Colt.
Next year's CIP addresses some of the long-term needs, like some of the irrigation systems that aren't working properly and need repair. There's no major capital expense other than there's some work that's addressing some soccer needs. There's a soccer field that's programmed in there, and then there's some improvements in that area. But again, we're going to use more of the capital money to address long-term operations issues.
And here's why I'm asking.
Maintenance and repair stuff.
I don't think I'm just doing this to answer questions. Here's what we ran into last year. We all ran into discussion with the Hurricanes, okay, and why they felt that a field that I spent at least a decade on, Colt Park football field, no longer adequate for any kind of game day presentation, and probably not adequate for practice presentation. And I remember when that field, a game day field. And so I'm kind of wondering, it looks like we don't have anything planned until the following CIP budget, which gets us into the next fiscal year. Has me wondering, when are we going to be able to address that section? Because there's 2 football fields there that used to be nice football fields. I'm not going to say world class, but they weren't bad fields, and certainly should be able to accommodate of our football needs, which from the parents who had the programs who were involved in Little League, that became an unworkable solution for them. I just want to know what we're going to do to address that, because now we're building a field in Keeney I don't think really is done yet either. And, so I'm just worried about where the kids are going to play, one, and then the best usage of tax dollars.
Well, 3 of the 4 fields in Keeney are
there's 4 fields at Keeney Waver. They're Little League and softball.
I'm talking about Ridgefield at the moment. With respect to the Hurricanes, Ridgefield. I drove by there the other day. Well, okay. Activities are all equal. Okay. But you and I both probably have a thing for football. But we spent a considerable amount of council time, working on a solution at Ridgefield. I don't see Ridgefield being in any better condition than it was last year. Fair to say.
That's only a temporary field. It's not meant to be a permanent solution. We do have, shown in the capital budget a number of multi-use fields that are being planned, and we are looking at, as I said, a turf management and improvement plan for all our fields, dealing with getting the turf in better condition.
Well, so if Ridgefield's a temporary location, then Colt is obviously not a temporary. So what are we doing for Colt?
And that's what I said. We are doing, aeration, doing soil amendments. We are working on that in the short term and getting all this testing done to do those improvements throughout the park, the athletic field system.
Also, I'd like to point out that Cronin Field is coming on, will be ready for play in September. So there's going to be a brand-new field that'll be ready. It's actually going to be sodded in about a month or so. So again, Cronin Field will be online by September for use.
Now, I'm not the expert that you guys are with respect to sod, but if we're putting in sod during the summer, let's say spring, will it have enough time to take root? Everything I know about fields tells me that's a really short time frame from putting down sod for it to really take root, grab hold, and have an opportunity to grow before it gets a lot of heavy usage. And I mean, that's my concern with Cronin. You told me this September, but we still see dirt on it. By the time you put that in, lucky you get 3 months before somebody steps on it.
The better scenario would be to let it lie fallow for a year. I'm not disagreeing. It's just that given the timeline, it will be irrigated, so we will be able to maintain it. But yes, under ideal conditions, we would allow it to lie fallow through the whole season and start using it in spring.
Assuming we run into problems, do we have a plan B? If we run into problems, which is Murphy's Law, do we have a plan?
Oh, sorry.
No, do we have a plan B?
We're into problems with what, Councilman?
Cronin.
With Cronin. Yeah,
Well, we will continue to do what we're doing now is to have them playing on other fields that they're playing on now temporarily while they're waiting for that field to be ready. That's what they have done. They've been doing practices in Keeney, and they've been playing different games in either Colt or Dillon.
While Tony's up here, what's the, and I know we discussed this sometime a little bit in the CIP, how concrete are we at Dillon at this point? I mean, in terms of just a kind of a plan B in-between approach while we're discussing the greater obvious needs the facility has?
The plan B is, again, at the request of council. Obviously, there is $1 million set aside. So should the plan not fall through or not develop with the developer that's being talked about with development services, that $1 million is available. In fact, we already have a designer on board to design a natural turf field for that location. And that was temporarily put on hold with the opportunity to have a developer do more than just the field, obviously, address. There's also $500,000 that has been set aside for ADA improvements to the locker room building and also to the bathroom building there at Dillon Stadium. So again, that's the plan B.
I'll stop. Real quickly, with Dillon, need to consider. By high school kids playing on that field, we've got club kids playing on that field. By early fall, there's nothing left of the grass in the center of the field. And by late fall, almost the entire section of field from the midway point to the 20 on both sides is substantially worn. And I'm just wondering what we need to do to try to address that issue as both neighborhood organizations and the schools continue to use that facility. Buckley Sports Science, okay, we've got Thanksgiving Day. I mean, on Thanksgiving Day, if it rains, it's a mud bowl. I ask these questions not to be tough, but I think some points our folks and kids, for their tax dollars, we've got to have a better plan to address the overall scope of their needs. I mean, this is what makes a community, these activities. And so I'm hoping we can come up with something real fast. I don't know if it's going to actually work this year, because I think, as you said, sometimes ground needs to sit for a year before it really takes hold. That I took too much time. I apologize.
Thank you. Councilman Deutsch. Councilman?
Thank you.
Councilman, do you have a number of questions or?
Yes, there's a number, a finite number.
Okay. I'd like to ask your indulgence. Councilman Anderson will have to leave early, so if you would defer to him.
Oh, please do, yes.
Thank you. Councilman Anderson.
Thank you, esteemed colleague. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple questions that are pretty quick. There was a traffic light that went down on Cleveland and Main Street in northern Hartford. The light went down prior to some of us coming on council. Got a lot of calls from constituents about having it been replaced. Well, the light has been replaced, and I thank you for that. But my kind of looking into it a little further is the individual that had the accident that took the light down. I understand that we could have went after him or the company to recoup some of the cost. And I think there was some miscommunication somewhere along the line, and it was never followed up on. I went to corporate counsel and had a discussion with some of the attorneys there, and I think we just missed the deadline. Statute of limitations kind of ran out like one day trying to recoup the cost. I understand the cost might have been in the excess of $100,000. Can you address the fact that moving forward, how are we, if this happens again, like sometimes you get people who don't have insurance and they may not be able to give restitution to the accident, but in this particular case, it was a commercial vehicle that accidentally took down the light. And if we went after them, they were able to kind of settle up. So moving forward, it's like money that went to the wayside. I'm trying to eliminate that from happening again. Do we have a mechanism in place right now to make sure that this doesn't fall through the crack? And again, and I know there's kind of coordination and communication amongst several departments, and I know not just coming on Public Works, but the police department and everybody else. How can we be more efficient with our responsibility to that?
Well, again, on the Public Works side, we know that's, there are a lot of times that there's different accidents that we have to work to replace infrastructure even with a traffic light. It's between not only Public Works, but it's the fire alarm, communications, telecommunications that also does the repairs. And in this case, because we wanted to do it expedited, and it was a good partnership with them. And we are, I have been working with trying to be able to better get some of the police reporting to us on that. And we're still working on getting that coordinated between us and get it over to Corporation Counsel. I think we have been doing better at that, knowing that this particular incident happening.
And just to be clear, you're referring to police reporting and work with respect to that incident, the incident at Cleveland Avenue in Maine?
I'm just saying, in general, we were talking about how to better get notification of those incidents and how to create a pathway to see that everything is checked off and that doesn't go through the cracks.
The communication is obviously been the issue between the various departments, because Kevin mentions the police department, because a lot of times when an accident does happen, the police do get called out. A lot of times there is a police report, but they don't notify anybody that one of our pieces of equipment or something that we own actually was damaged. And so we wind up finding out about it either from somebody in the community, or we read about it in the paper, or we hear about it from somewhere else. And so we're really just trying to work with the police department and with others to have a better system of telling us when they find out about something that happens and it's our property, to let us know so that we can then go after those people. The investigator in the Corporation Counsel's office is doing a better job. He's a former police officer, and so he does at least have some relationship with them, and so he's trying to do a better job of staying on top of it. But we have a lot of work to do. People don't really think about it sometimes when they're responding to these calls, that this is city-owned property, and we probably should tell somebody that somebody just damaged our property and that we have the right to go after people. Some cases, unfortunately, that we have tried to go after, people don't always have insurance. And so, even in some cases where we have attempted to go after someone who's damaged our property, we have not been successful. But having said that, we still have a lot of communication that we have to work out, a lot of bugs in the system that we have to continue to work out so that those things don't happen.
Through you, sir. So you're telling me that at this point, we've done a better job at least addressing that there is a breakdown in the system,
Yes.
and then that we've taken necessary steps or protocols to put in place that we can follow, and all three departments can communicate amongst each other to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future again.
I'm telling you that it's a work in progress. We're
Work in
not there yet,
progress.
but we're
You're not
working
there
on
yet.
it. I'm not going to
'Cause I was
sit here
going
and
to
tell
say,
you.
I didn't hear what you described. I hear that there's no system in place today, no new protocols, and that they're talking about the fact that we got a problem, we got to fix it.
Yes, yes. And it's not for trying. It's just that everybody needs to agree. All the people out in the field need to agree and be taught to make sure that they report those things to the proper channels so that people can follow up on them. So, it's not as easy as Kyle's,
Okay.
Councilman Anderson's the point person every time something happens, because you're not the person who's out in the field that's responding to the call all the time. So those people out in the field need to be taught and reminded that they need to tell people that they need to report it to Kevin, to my office, to whomever, that this happened. Same thing with the fire department. When they go out to calls, they need to tell us that there are things that have been damaged as a result of some incident, and that it's our property, and that we need to at least be notified that something happened so we can follow up and see what we can recoup if we can.
One more quick question through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm hoping that we can really address that, because that's money lost.
Agree.
That's money lost. And then, thank you for, first of all, Public Works, thank you. You guys have a phenomenal job. It's huge. You do a lot of things. Let me give you some kudos before I just stop pounding you real quick. Sports fields, I know that's been a big discussion with, I know, not to piggyback on what Councilman Kennedy has already expressed, but I know there's dialogue and communication with the Board of Education about moving forward on this. So if you can briefly kind of just give us some update to where we are for this particular season, kind of putting a Band-Aid on it, but having a more comprehensive plan moving forward.
Yes, I mean, this is something that is, certainly important. We obviously, in some ways, it's a good problem to have that every day there is this much activity going on. There were some things as far as even the schools. Some of the school programs kind of went by the wayside in not too long ago past, and I think with some of that also meant that some of the care of their fields went the same way, and so that when they reinvested in some of these programs, the first place to look to get field use was back in our parks and with fields that were maintained by Public Works. So, our staff, particularly Brenda in our office, went very hard to juggle many competing games and practices for schools and little leagues and community groups, and was able to get that out among all of our fields. And so we are engaging with the board to see what we can do as far as getting their fields in better shape. Also, again, in the capital budget, we do have the two Ripken fields that we're looking at, which would be artificial turf fields, which would be able to be programmed more heavily without regard to the wear of the fields, and that would be for multi-use of not only baseball type things, but soccer and football as well.
So is it a cost issue? I mean, this year it seems like everything is kind of dumping you guys at the 12th hour, it seems like. And I guess you guys are kind of scrambling to kind of make this happen for the Board of Education. So we're good at this point, and we're kind of got a Band-Aid on it. But moving forward, is it basically a plan of action that we're going to have we can implement it? Have we come together as a meeting and kind of sat down and worked out who's going to pay for what and the cost factor with all of this kind of collaboration?
Well, we are working on, through recent changes to the code, there is the ability to charge the board. Those fees have not been established yet, but we are working towards that. And also, I think, again, when looking at overall demand, we do have to be looking at what our overall field use in the parks and in the different school facilities to see that we're better utilizing them in a comprehensive way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilman Deutsch.
Thank you, and through the chair. I'll try to do this while Councilman Anderson is still here on his way out. I'd like to pick up on one line of questioning he had and give 3 additional instances. And what I would like to specifically request is that someone get back to us in writing in 24 hours on 4 examples. The first is the one that I think that we were talking about, is that traffic light that was knocked over up at the corner of Cleveland and Main. We were told in an email at one point that the thing would be fixed in February, and then it was said to be May, and then it was said to be sometime later. I don't know, July or August or something like that. As a matter of record, and I tried to hear all the dialogue, but I'd like to know what exactly was the cost to fix that situation for the traffic light, and who bore that cost? Dollar figures. In other words, what was the cost to fix it, and it was borne by whom? That's one example. Let's say that traffic light, that one example up there at Cleveland and Main. Another one, which I know I've asked this before, I just can't keep in my head a written response. If, let's say, in a school building, specific example is Hartford Public High School, somebody put in the wrong type of steel in a pipe, the one that was not specified or not according to code or not according to the architect's plan, and then sometime it had to be fixed. I'm speaking of the piping that goes to the swimming pool that apparently, I've heard from report, is corroded because the right metal wasn't used. So again, I'd like to ask the same 2 questions. What is or will be the cost to fix it, and who exactly bears that cost? Third example, which again, I just can't remember a clear response. On the public safety complex, when it was being built, everyone knows that there was an attempt to prop up those brittle brick walls in the original structure. The engineers tried to brace it with these diagonal braces throughout the winter, and of course it crumbled sometime midwinter because of ice and all that. What exactly was the cost incurred to prop them up and then to clear them when they fell down when the new structure was being built? In other words, you could say it was wasted money because it didn't work. It was an attempt to brace it, and as I said it in the past, any high school student could have seen that the bracing wasn't adequate for the winter. And so sure enough, they fell down. So what was the cost to correct that by removal? I think Manafort did it. And who bore the cost? And the 4th example I'd like to ask, if there are potholes in the streets, what exactly, how many claims have we gotten, let's say in the past, 1 year, the past 365 days? How many claims has the city gotten for vehicular damage, like a broken rim, let's say, from these potholes? And who exactly has borne the cost in the final analysis? So let's say if we had 20 claims, a certain dollar amount, and I assume that we paid some of the claims and denied others. I don't know. I had a broken rim. I didn't put in a claim. It's my own city, and felt funny putting in a claim, although the pothole really was there, and it was there, and it was there, and it was there, and then sure enough, at least one rim was broken. So I like maybe if you could within a day or so, those 4 examples where we just say what is the cost to fix and who has saddled that cost. And some of them is big money and some is probably peanuts. I don't know.
Through Mr. President, Just on the last item, I believe Travelers actually handles the claims for the potholes, so we might not be able to get that information to you in 24 hours, but we'll certainly make the request.
Well, okay, the
Get it to you as
potholes have
soon as
been there for a while, so more than 24 hours is fine. Okay, so speaking of that, and again, I think there are more important needs the city has to take care of than potholes, but I would like to ask this. What are the practices for actively locating and fixing potholes now that the winter is over? And I can cite, and I don't mean potholes, solely potholes. I'll cite there's one pothole somewhere in my neighborhood, just a pothole, and there's one manhole cover put in by CLP in another part of the city, which is about an inch or two below the asphalted surface. And I know I've asked this before, but I just can't, it's a matter of budget, it's a matter of financing. Why exactly have those not been fixed if they've been a situation for months upon months upon months? Those are two different examples. One is just a plain old pothole, although it's deep, and the other is a manhole cover that somebody else is supposed to fix. So can you please explain for us how we can manage those things actively, proactively?
As far as potholes, we do have crews that go out on routes on a daily basis. So, and as you mentioned that, we were getting in, prior to over the winter time, we were using materials that was not going to be as long lasting and durable as now with the plants opening up. So that's one way that we address pothole situation. We also have inspectors, and there are additional inspectors that are reflected in our recommended budget to be able to be more aggressive in identifying both the regular potholes and utility cuts, utility structures that have any deficiencies. Part of our improvements in our GIS development, we have begun to track them in those and track them as we give them to
okay, here, I don't mean to interrupt, but in the interest of time, my question is, let's say for the past 2 years, there are two individuals sitting here that have also known about the situation, and you wonder where the buck stops. It's either individuals in this room or in the corner of the building in the mayor's office. And I'm having a hard time understanding why these things have not already been done, because they're so recurrent and so chronic and have had attention drawn to them. And so for a pothole, for instance, you say their trucks go around and so on, but here it is May 2nd, and these have been there for months. You hit them and your idler arms can get bent. So I don't know why it hasn't already been done. I just can't understand why those things already don't either have a hot patch or a cold patch or something, because they've been there a long time and they're visible. And whatever number of square miles we have in the city, I wonder why it hasn't already been done, let's say in April or March, I don't know. And likewise for the manhole covers. I'd like a specific answer as to why someone doesn't hold to the CL&P and MDC, hold their feet to the fire to fix those things if by contract that's their obligation.
And can you understand the question?
Yes, it is.
So
In writing is fine, and if it's not 24 hours, then 48 is fine, because it's been a recurring question, and the things are still there, month upon month upon month. And I don't know if the citizens have to call attention to it, or you do it automatically, like you're supposed to get a checkup every year just to prevent things. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So let me cease on that and move for a minute to this. In the last big snowstorm, I'll try to prioritize. I will. In the last big snowstorm, we pointed out that there were certain priority routes, A and B, for plowing. Remember? And we went through this after that big snowstorm. And there were A routes and B routes and so on. And many citizens felt that their own narrow streets hadn't been plowed for 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever. And yet, when I asked the mayor, whether there could be something of a shifting so there'd be a partial clearance of the downtown streets where nobody was driving because the traffic was banned for a while and so on, and a priority shifted somewhat to the local neighborhood streets, at least for a lane or so an ambulance or a fire truck get through. I may be at fault, but I don't remember a clear response saying next time, next winter, we can do it differently so that we do some of the downtown and then we clear all the neighborhood streets, at least one lane, and then we get back to the downtown. Can you tell us what to look forward to so that we won't have a problem in the future?
Sure. We, I believe that the council was provided with the report that we had of our task force that looked into the storm, and we, are aware that in these storms there are, every storm has a little bit of different character, and we plan how attack it as we understand how much snow is coming on, how long it's going to be. This was obviously a historic storm and had unique challenges with that. We did analysis of the A and the S routes to see, again, how far any particular properties would be from access to an A route, and we are analyzing how to address those areas that need to get quicker service. So most importantly, we want to make sure we have emergency access, so to support our first responders, and that is to get out to the A routes, because that's where they're going to have to ultimately get to. And we do, in most storms, we will just open up the routes before we clear any routes curb to curb. Again, with a particular blizzard that we were talking about, just to clear some of the A routes took more time and more resources to push them back, just to open them up. And then we got into doing into the S route. So we also had several conversations with key healthcare providers to make sure that we've identified where they are, and sometimes they were not directly on a route. So to see that we plan to address those particular routes in a timely manner and to get those locations done.
Okay. Again, I don't mean to be abrupt, but I still haven't heard a clear answer that once you get at least a couple lanes in the A room so you can get to the hospital and you get to a fire station, if someone is in active labor on a street where her street has no passage with even if it's only 1 foot, let alone 2 of snow, and then someone has to drag them on a sled, to the from their house in the middle of a B route, 72 hours after the snowstorm, it has to drag them to an A route. All I'm doing is asking, will things be different next time in response to the citizens' complaints? Well, we're being a messenger that it's fine to have the 3 or 4 lanes downtown and the A routes, but I don't want to reiterate. Will anything be different if it happens again?
Yes, there's in a variety of ways. We are looking at the operational plan and addressing some of the concerns that you spoke of as far as the routes, and we are also have made a number of investments in equipment to make our delivery of the snow plowing services more efficient.
Okay, at this point now, I don't mean to belabor that, because hopefully it won't snow now for a few months and we can fix things. Here, on the neighborhood initiatives, in the budget book, there are certain amounts allocated, but I noticed, for instance, in the adopted 12 to 13 budget, there's $624,000, and recommended for 13 to 14 is $314,000, less than half, just about half.
Councilman Deutsch, what page are you on?
I'm sorry, 25-2. It's in the, in the budget summary, and I think it's also, I don't know, in the detail lines. Okay, 25-2, in the top left, it says neighborhood initiatives. 11 to 12 was only 3,000. 12 to 13, 624,000, and then the revised 12 to 13 was 485,000. And then the recommended for this coming year is 314,000, and the forecast is about the same for the following year. Can you tell us, with all the talk about neighborhood initiatives and LSNI, is some of the neighborhood initiative money elsewhere, or are we just decreasing it?
Yes, it is elsewhere. What we did was we actually have a line item in the capital improvement fund, which is under neighborhood development activities, and so we're paying for 50% of the staff from the neighborhood initiative out of the capital fund, in addition to all the supplies and equipment out of the capital fund. So right now, for the neighborhood initiative program for the next few years, I think we have it $1 million for next year. This year we have 500,000, $1 million for next year, and $1 million for I think the next 4 subsequent years. There's about $6 million all told for the neighborhood initiatives, and 50% of the salary for all the people who are working in the neighborhood initiative, whether they be in the COO's office as the district captains, in L&I as the inspectors, in DPW you have the actual workers. We have some inspectors in the health department. All those people are paid for 50% out of the budget of the department that they fall under, and then 50% out of the capital improvement program.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So that's very helpful. Here, last item in a sense. Well, here, by the way, we asked, I think, yesterday for a scenario where if the capital budget had to be cut, let's say, by 10%, it's hypothetical. Have we yet gotten that supposition that the result of that query, if you eliminated 10% of the capital budget priorities?
Yes, we've received that question, and Development Services is working on it. The preliminary, according to Linda behind me, it's been finished, so it'll be posted tomorrow.
Okay, fine. I don't want to incur any more overtime, so I don't mean. Okay, and the last thing is this: on furlough days, if you look on page 37 of the detailed line items for DPW, there's a line in each case for, of course, the total regular payroll and then the furlough days. You see that the actual in 2012 to 2013 furlough days was let's say 2,218 out of a total of 457,000 for that department. That comes to about 0.5%, if I did a quick calculation. About 0.5% went into furlough days. If you look in DPW facilities, which was 668,000 total, and furlough days 4,500, that's about 0.7%. So administration was 0.5. The furlough in administration in facilities was 0.7. That was on page 37. If you shift ahead to engineering administration, the furlough days was only 0.1%, not too much. And again, looking at street services, the furlough days was 0.7%. So I guess I'm just trying to look ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
So that things are fair and proportioned, so that I'm not saying that the percentages have to be equal in terms of furlough days depending on the division and the salary levels. You know, I made that point before, but such that the allocation of that pain of furlough days is progressive and proportional rather than disproportional and anti-progressive, you see? So the only reason I say that is we, City Council, are staring at that kind of necessity, I'm afraid to say. So I'd like to, I made those rough calculations now mentally, and I'd like to know, as we make up the budget, if there can be any allocation of furlough days in proportion to the total salaries paid in that division. You see what I mean?
Yes, but some of what is reflected in that is it depends on what bargaining units and non-bargaining positions are in those, and some bargaining units did not accept furlough days, and therefore you won't see as much of a percentage in those areas that have, for instance, HMIA did not take furlough days, so you're not going to see where you have a division that has many employees of that bargaining unit. You will not see as much of a percentage as those who had the non-union or or other, or 1716.
Yeah, but finally, it seems to me that it's been the reverse. That's all. Again, it's something that you can take up. But looking at these figures, at least in the past year, it hasn't worked out that way that I can tell. Now, I may be wrong. And also, I suppose we have to remember finally that if it's not furlough days, then it may be layoffs. That's what we're told. That's what we read, and that's what we're told. And so it's a different method of achieving the same result, which is saving in those divisions. So I guess I'd leave it there because we can examine further where what's commonly called shared sacrifice falls, and whether it's in administration or frontline services, how it goes with full-time versus part-time workers and so on. I mean, this will be an issue, and I don't think we'll settle it tonight. If you have anything you can write up about priorities and where these things, either layoffs or furlough days, will fall, the impact, that will be helpful, I suppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. Good evening, Kevin. How are you doing?
All right, yourself.
Very good, thanks. Just have a few questions for you. One is I realize, I guess, belatedly that this was the week for the spring lawn refuse pickup. And I was wondering, how was that communicated to the public? I know some of my neighbors were not aware of it either.
We have that I know it was on the website. Did we have, and I'm not sure if we had did we have the Hartford News in that? We had flyers that went out to the NRZs as well, and perhaps we always, again, as we've stated here before, there's always more room for more communication. So if that has been an issue, we'll look into. Oh, sorry about that. If we need to look to do more and for communication in that, we will we'll do so.
Well, it certainly seems that there's a lot more communication regarding the fall leaf pickup, which of course is a big concern of everybody's, given the volume of leaves that a lot of us have to deal with in our yards. But I think that even in the springtime, there's quite a bit of refuse that comes from our lawns that needs to be taken care of. And so what is the procedure during the summer months for pickup of such?
Well, in most cases, in those times, you always have the opportunity to take green waste up to the transfer station, and that's one of the most effective ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I have a question on your manpower analysis on custodial staffing. Is this the analysis that we've been talking about a few times over the last few months regarding custodial staffing around various facilities in the city and identifying how much staffing is needed to maintain a certain level of service?
That's correct. This is only kind of a rough gross analysis on this one, where we went into detail on a particular building to get a kind of a ratio determined, and we kind of applied it across the board to other buildings. But what we're going through now is a detailed analysis of these other buildings to the same level that we did in that initial building, so we can get a more precise number, and particularly for each building, so we can have a better idea of what each building costs to maintain, and if there's issues of consolidating buildings, and if we're spreading out resources amongst buildings, that would be more efficient to combine services.
Could you give me a description of what a good level of service would look like?
I can provide you what there's definitions that this analysis package that we're using to do this has a defined for each
Yeah, if you can
level,
submit
from like a
that
white
in
glove
writing,
type
yeah,
of
that'd be fine.
pristine to just kind of a
Thanks.
bare minimum level. So we can provide that as a written
Okay,
response.
that'd be great, thank you. Now, looking at this, I see the South End Senior Center lists a 1.46 number of custodians as an estimate. Is the anticipation that custodial staff would be assigned to various facilities, or will you maintain this process you have now of having teams of custodians dealing with all the different sites?
Again, this is a needs analysis. Once we establish that, that's not to say that we're going to have any additional bodies. We will know what the needs are, and we will develop a strategy to do that. Whether it is a dedicated staff person, roving crew, whether it's a night crew. The first order of business is to establish what those needs and those levels are, and then also to say, is there areas where, we're at, have a service level that we're going to have to ratchet down and say that, we're not going to be able to get any more bodies here, so we'll have to, line by line say, okay, where could we see a reduction in the service level, and what would that mean? And if what would we expect otherwise? So we will give us an opportunity to put out some scenarios there, again, for your information and administrations to make budgetary decisions as to, no, this isn't good enough. We have to raise the level of service to X, and that will mean if we want to do that, this is the bodies that you're going to need to do it. And if not, we'll have to accept levels of service that are different.
Right, and that makes sense. I would just ask or request that once you've completed that analysis, if you could provide a presentation to a council committee, the Public Works and Parks Committee, perhaps.
Certainly.
I'm not the chair of it, but I sit on the committee, and I certainly would like to see a presentation about that. Now moving over to energy and some of your new initiatives. I see you mentioned management software for energy management. I had a concern raised to me today about this energy management software. Will this software accept automated data entry of utility bills? Do you know that the software is being looked at?
I've sat in on a couple of the meetings regarding the energy management software, and that is the intent, to get an interface from Connecticut Light and Power on every single account that the city's responsible for, and load it into this software, process it there, and then eventually even load it into our Munis financial system for payments.
That's one of the criteria for the software selection?
Yes, it is.
Good, because the concern that was raised to me was the concern that the software being reviewed would only accept the manual data entry, which just sounds very inefficient and labor-intensive and error-prone, so I certainly wouldn't.
If I could further clarify that, what we're trying to do, the difficulty we're having now is getting the information from the utility companies in a way that can be properly processed. But no, of course not. It would not be that we would manually take the information and do what we're essentially doing now. The software would be of no benefit then.
Right.
So right now,
Good.
we're just back and forth with the utility companies to get it in a way that can then
Get it in the right
be
format?
used. Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Councilwoman Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. Thank you, Mr. Burnham, for your presentation. I only have a few brief questions, and one of the things I like to say is, just from my experience with Public Works, with the exception of that 30-inch storm, your response time, with you and Petrel and Rhonda, your response time probably equals the response time we get from the fire department.
Well, thank you.
But I think we probably really need to see the plan for next time, because I just felt like Public Works had let go of anyone with snow removal experience, and we ended up with a real problem. My other question is, did we obtain FEMA reimbursement from that storm? I know we were eligible for something, but if so, how much, and how much were we eligible for?
Yes, we did. I don't know if, do you have the number on that?
We don't have the numbers available at this moment. We'll provide them to you. The storm required work that lasted for several days. FEMA initially was only reimbursing for 2 days, but recently extended it for 3. So we will provide the details by department and by different categories and how much we're getting reimbursed and how much we're not getting reimbursed.
All right, so you're going to provide us with that information. Yes. Thank you. Do you know how long it takes for them to reimburse us for our expenses?
Well, it varies, but it could take upwards of a year.
Thank you. All right, and my other question is, how are seasonal workers being selected? What is the outreach? How do people know in Hartford that they're hiring seasonal workers at Public Works? What's the length of time? How much do they get paid? When was the cutoff date, or is there a cutoff date that's already taken place, and who is eligible?
Well, there's a lot of different outreach, North End Agent, and other news publications. We typically have, there's through the interest cards we know of when we want to get maintainers. We have hundreds of interest cards that we can refer to and ask and contact them. For this latest interviews that we're doing for maintainers, we have over 630 applicants for the position. So there is, certainly plenty of interest out there for more positions than we're going to be able to. Certainly not going to be able to take on the 630 employees.
And I can probably answer the other questions. We actually had done a pretty poor posting initially for the maintainers, in that we had only posted it on the website and on the board. And so when I started to hear some complaints about it, I told them to extend the posting. So I think it closed at the end of March.
I'm not sure, but we can get you that. We can get you that.
I think it was March 30th that it might have closed. So we extended the posting, and also we advertised in the neighborhood newspapers, sent it out to the NRZs, and made sure that we did a more extensive job, which is what we're beginning to do with a lot of especially the Hartford resident preference ones, is to make sure that we communicate besides just using our website and the board outside of HR. So it's closed now. We're actually about to interview, I think on the 15th, 16th, and 17th. We're going to have a panel which is going to be composed of representatives from DPW, the community, and also from other departments to interview individuals. So we have 630 applicants, roughly, that are going to be interviewed for the position. And then there's, as Kevin mentioned, the mayor has authorized the hiring of 20 seasonals who will work from, basically, we're a little bit late, but usually April till maybe the first week in December through leaf collection time, and then 10 people to stay on not permanently, but year-round, and to supplement the workforce in that way. So a total of 30 people are going to be hired. 35, excuse me, Jose is telling me the number is 35 people are authorized to be hired. And in fact, 1716, we met with them last week, maybe it was this week, Monday, we met with 1716, and they've authorized us, if we so desire, to hire up to 50 seasonal part-timers, and they would allow us to do that.
And those positions have already been filled? Those positions
they have not,
have already
none of them
been
have
taken?
been filled.
Is the list been closed on that?
The list has been closed, yes.
Okay.
We did receive it. There's 630 on the list, but I think the number of applications we received was probably closer to 700, maybe even 750.
All right, and thank you. And my last question is, what is going on with Las Vegas and Keeney Park? And has there ever been a portion of the park closed off to the public in the past? My phone has been ringing off the hook all day, and when I went to check on it, it looked like a public works job that had put the, it looked like Jersey barriers across the road. And is that a temporary fix? Have the residents been talked to, or have any, have community organizations in the West Indian community in particular been talked to and brought into the process? And, just what am I supposed to tell people? They're on my phone.
Yes, we've been, in conjunction with the police department, we've been, working on this matter. And yes, there has been extensive community outreach to NRZs, to different, from the cricket organizations that use the field, Friends of Keeney, a variety of organizations, which I can, again, get you a list of those outreach. I don't have them off the top of my head, all of them that have been done, but I know, particularly with the police department, they've been doing most of the outreach on that. And we have, we are looking, as I, again, spoke to in the presentation, looking how to program all the parks from Keeney to all others with different activities, and when there are situations where we need to manage the control of certain access to areas so that we can have different programming in there, we will do so. And the way that things are set up now is a temporary solution, and we're looking to put in better access control, gates, and also a lot of railing you've seen go up in some parks to prevent motor vehicle traffic, and whether it be cars or motorbikes, little ATVs, so that they don't go onto the fields. We're investing a lot of money into these fields, and we don't want people to be damaging the turf. So a lot of it is dealing with access control, and I would have to defer some of the other things about this to the police.
Just a comment on this, and that is that if you've talked to and if you've reached out to a number of organizations, is there a plan for what's going to happen with that? Because right now we have an extremely upset Caribbean community that believes that they were targeted, and they don't do it in the Latino community, they don't do it in the white community. Oh, yeah, that there's, the question is whether or not there has been a practice of just gating off parks, and why hasn't traditional police enforcement been used? Because one of the issues is that the police have the ability, they know that people are out there doing illegal things. Why have people not been arrested and people been warned or ticketed or whatever, as opposed to blocking off the park? Because some of these people, that is where they hang out, and that's what they do in their community, and in their culture. So what is going to happen? Also, the restrooms are behind those barricades, so now they have to walk a period of a great distance to get behind those barricades, because they can't bring their cars back there. So if you said it's temporary, but how temporary? What am I supposed to tell people when they know I'm in charge of, I'm the chairperson for parks, and they are on my case about this, and I can honestly say I don't know. So.
Well, again, this is a cooperative partnership that we're doing with police, and they're taking the lead on it, and we are doing what we can to support their efforts in the infrastructure, and we certainly can get back to you and to your committee with more in-depth discussion on that. We can both, I'm sure, we can both be there to go over the strategies and the concerns that you have.
And I would appreciate that, and so that I can at least tell people what's going on, and finding out after the fact that this is being done is distressing, only because I can't go anywhere in Hartford without being stopped on this issue right now. So hopefully we'll be able to resolve it. Hopefully the communities that are affected will be brought in. They're also very upset over the issue of the being called the cricket community and having the cricket community associated with the illegal, whatever, the illegal activities that may be going on. And they're very concerned about that as well. So just the fact that their community is being brought into question is also an issue that came up today. So if we could, somehow come up with a resolution to that.
So I believe the follow-up is that at your committee, that the police and DPW will be represented to report on this issue? Right.
That would be helpful, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you'll put that on your committee as an item to be discussed?
Yes, I will.
Okay. We'll make sure that the chief is there as well.
Pardon me?
I'll make sure that the chief is there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman De Jesus?
Yes. Jennings, we're going on a road trip to the South End. I will show you some same problems we're facing. We're facing the same problems all over the city. I think about a year ago, we had the same problems at Goodwin Park where they shut down the parking lot. They try to do that every year too. But the police department is trying to get a hold of that and planning around the people, making sure that the dirt bikes and all that stuff is off the fields. And it is true. I've seen pictures and videos. It's very destructive. And sometimes that's what you have to do, contain the area until you get the right personnel around there, probably surveillance teams and all that to make it happen. Sometimes that's the only way to do it. My questions, I got to make them very quick. So I got I guess, a little bit of feedback from the rental of our city parks. They came around $19,000. I just don't see us really making a good effort of collecting the fees that we should be charging. These I see that are like for sports, soccer, kickball, softball, rugby, football, but every other month at least in our agenda there's an event at the Keeney Pond or at the Cal Anderson or the Pope Park Recreation Center or at the South End Center, and clearly by our standards there's an ordinance that says we should be charging because there's a public works person that needs to be taken out of whatever they're at to show up and close up and sometimes clean up afterwards. I just don't see that there's any fees being charged for that, even though there's an ordinance that says there should be.
Councilman, all of the events you were talking about at the South End Senior Center, the rec centers, et cetera, those are through the Cultural Affairs Office, special events. The fees you have are only for permits on athletic fields. That's all Public Works handles. And a lot of our field usage is for youth, which according to the ordinance that we don't charge. So those are the actual fees. We do not issue any permits without getting the payment prior. So the events you're talking about are special events, and I'm sure they could get you that information.
Clearly, 26-26, it states that it's Public Works. I don't know if things have changed.
Yeah.
But it clearly states that, and a lot of these activities is not even covered in 26-6. So I'm not sure if I think that my question wasn't misunderstood, but I think we should probably look back at that section, chapter 26, Parks and Recreations, 2-6 in our code, where it clearly states what my request is. But I honestly don't think this is the right information probably, and that's probably why it doesn't make sense.
And can I respond to that also? First of all, we are looking actually at that same section we're reviewing the fees and making some decisions about what fees can and should be increased and for whom. But with regard to what Rhonda said on the special events and under the MECA, which is the Marketing and Economic and Cultural Affairs Department under Development Services.
We can increase
they actually,
them.
Right. The reason
but are
that
we collecting them?
it's treated as a special event only in the sense that whenever someone wants to rent city property for some function, it goes through the Special Events Task Force, just like a parade or any of the other activities would be. So they actually would be the ones that can tell you what they charge, what they bring in. And so when the Development Services Department comes in for their budget, we can have a conversation about how they go about permitting and collecting fees, and how they charge and what they don't charge for.
Right, so I'll ask the question today so that I can have the
Yes.
information and we can go back and forth. And probably
Yes.
I'd even have a
Certainly.
questions for them
Certainly.
at that time. My other concern is it's the special events. Let's go back to special events here. And I see a pattern. DPW does a great job making cuts. Problem is that at times you guys are overseeding the cuts. For example, DPW OT for special events. You guys budgeted $32,500, and you guys exceeded it about 2.5 times to about $93,000. I mean, where does the buck stop? Where does the director say, you know, we're twice the amount of budget that we anticipated? Where do we say, you know, we have to stop, or we can't keep operating this way? I mean, where does it stop?
Well, again, you know, we're responding to the special events that are applied for and, you know, go through the approval. So it's not always, you know, you can't always forecast what special events will be out there and approved. We make our best estimate on that, and we have done efforts to control what the DPW costs are for that. On most events, except some of the most larger events, we're just there for setup and cleanup. We don't stay there for continuously, so we are doing what we can to control the costs for the different special events. But you know, that there are some you know, benefits that are derived from these events and economic impact that they have. So there's you know, some trade-offs there.
Do you bring these concerns when you're going over budget? So once you're over budget, what is the procedure that is used? Because it seems that we have this problem with the DPW, with the fire department and the police department. I mean, when you guys go over your budget, at least 50 or 100% over the budget, anticipated budget, and when you go up to about 2 times the budgeted amount, and now you guys are getting close to 3 times the amount of budgeted. I mean, where do you guys start to cut back and say, listen, guys, this is not good. We need to start, you know, and if it was one time, there is patterns in here where we consistently are doing this. Administratively, what are we doing? Because this is a major issue, and I think we need as much feedback from you guys to try to resolve this issue. But we don't get no notification as to we're going over budget, and I mean, we're talking about 3 times the amount.
We had this conversation, I think, yesterday, and about special events and really coming up with, you know, a strategy for how we deal with special events. Perhaps making some suggestions for how do we revise the ordinance. I think you heard the chief say yesterday that in some cases, when there are organizations that have the wherewithal to be able to pay, that he's starting to have the conversation, at least on the police end, about them actually hiring the officers on what's the private duty jobs. Excuse me, I had a brain freeze there. Private duty jobs, and so, you know, we really need to start thinking about how we can do those kinds of things, also with DPW and perhaps with fire, also for the organizations that have the wherewithal. For those that don't, it's going to be a recurring issue. I think we've said over and over, unfortunately, that the fees that we're charging for the majority of the other organizations are just not sufficient, and that so there's no way to reduce the overtime without coming up with a plan for how do we either restrict the length of some of the parades, where we come up with where they can and cannot be. Maybe they have to be in a park. Maybe the length is only 1 block. We have to come up with some other strategies for how do we reduce the costs. Otherwise, we're going to continue to pay these amounts for overtime if we're going to support these events. So if we're going to stay the way that we are and nothing's going to change, then we're going to continue to see these kinds of costs. So, we have to work together to try to come up with some strategies, both the administration and the council, but also with the groups as well, to try to further refine the costs, because we can't afford to continue to do it this way.
Right, and I think it's just, and I'll wrap it up, and I'll refrain from asking any other questions, but it's just concerning that when this is happening, we're not notified. There should be some outreach from the department head and saying, listen, guys, this is not looking good. I'm not going to meet budget. Or even recommending some recommendations, and not wait till we're digging through the budget to find this out and actually bring it to you. We should have a continuous conversation about these issues. We shouldn't have to sit here and have a discussion about this time of day. I mean, I should literally be having time to be reading recommendations as to where you guys feel that we can make cuts. And honestly, this budget again is not full of cuts. There's a lot of transferring, and my thing, I really want some solutions, and that's really where it comes from the leadership of these departments to provide us some guidance, because we're not there. We're not seeing the problem, but we don't want to just act or be reactive, and then you guys may not be satisfied with the recommendations we ultimately make for you guys. We actually want your feedback, so hopefully moving forward, we start receiving feedbacks and addressing these issues, and give us some advice as to what are the best procedures for us to move forward.
If I can say something on special events, some of the data we've collected recently has been very revealing. One thing about special events I've recently learned is that we have 2 full-time dedicated people, employees who work on special events. I think it would be prudent to bring them into the fold and ask them what they recommend to try to narrow the gap between revenues and expenses in this category, and task them to find solutions as well.
Councilman Cruz.
Thank you, and through the chair. Good evening. As always, I have to acknowledge and express appreciation for the Department of Public Works. I think you guys do an amazing job, and it's a lot on your plate.
Thank you.
And so I appreciate the care and professionalism. I've seen it myself. I've been a witness to that, and I think I've expressed that to you in many emails. My first question is there revenue from our recycling program, and does it make up for the expenses made by actual collection of recycling items?
Their recycling saves us by not getting charged for the tonnage, whereas the tonnage of municipal solid waste is going to cost us. Occasionally there has been a rebate on that, but it would not cover the entire cost of collection.
Good Chair, again, my second question is really based on page 6-14, and it's on the Public Works, the revenue. And I apologize for my ignorance in advance, but what is the trash cart? And then in parentheses, it says canned fees. What does that mean?
That's for the trash carts. There's a charge of $35 a can to purchase a trash cart.
Okay, and
recycling cans are free.
Thank you. And then my other question to that is, I see that all these revenues have actually gone down, some actually by 15,000. One has gone from 18 all the way now to 17, then the other one 30,000 to 15, and they all continue to go down. Is there a reason why those revenues go down?
Well, certainly on the trash carts, I mean, some of these carts have, as they've been replaced, they last like 18 years, so they're not, as constituents have replaced them, there's been less of a flow of new carts. And also, that's true, there was a fee change as well in earlier years. They were charged $70 for a can, and we then subsidized the can to $35.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and for your department's work.
Okay, thank you
Good
very
night.
much.
We are adjourned. Yep.
You signed off on the ones I sent, right, but that didn't include the special, or whatever that question was.